Welcome everybody to Elan Vitae Magazine's EV Unfolds Roundtable Series. Today we are talking about excuses. In this day and age, we are finding all of those excuses that were showing up for reasons we didn't do the things we love, reasons we didn't get the things done that we wanted to do have disappeared because our lives have changed. Our work life is different, our home life is different, and yet we still aren't getting done the things that we really want and enjoying the time that we have. So we thought a great topic today would be to tackle those excuses. Elan Vitae Magazine is all about embracing our multidimensionality. So we've gathered a panel of people who have diverse experience in life and in business and in work, and have brought their perspectives to the table today to talk about how excuses are affecting them and how they're moving through it during this time. So I'd like to welcome fellow contributor to the magazine, Shenna Driscoll-Salvato, and educator. We've got Jim Lenaway, who is an entertainment coordinator for Walt Disney World in Florida. And we've got Zoe Mullen Stout, who is a musician and also a musician instructor. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.
I would love to hear this topic of excuses. First of all, sometimes this word just sort of can make your skin crawl. So when I say the word excuses, what comes up for you guys?
I'll start. I'm a very analytical person. And so before I try to make an excuse for something, in my head is going through all these lists of things and a matrix of why I should or shouldn't do things and what might come out of that. And so I think when I was younger, I was maybe quick to make an excuse and then try to do it anyway, make up for that. Whereas I get older now, I'm a little, quicker to think and slower to speak. And okay, instead of making an excuse for something or saying, why should I do that? Maybe I should say, why not? What could be standing in my way that I can't get around somehow? And so it's put a little bit different perspective on me to think about why should I not do something versus why I should do something. And that's helped guide my life pretty much.
Beautiful.
Nice. Yeah, my big contribution to that is excuses for me are often made to myself. It's not necessarily to someone else. I'm a relatively independent person. I don't have my own kids or, family life that I'm kind of wrapped up in. So if I make an excuse, it's really me and myself that has to deal with it. So I have found kind of what I can do to work through that is make things more of a lifestyle rather than it being, it's almost like it's not even an option that I don't do that thing. It's like if it's woven into my life, kind of like biking or something, or with my music, like practicing, if it's more something that I look forward to because it's part of who I am and the way that I'm living, I find that I'm not going to really have a reason to say no. I'm more like, okay, I can do this. I'm excited. I'm going to make myself do it and enjoy it in the process. So that's my big thing, is just not making excuses to myself. So, and yeah, making it part of my life.
Mm.
Yeah, one thing that comes to me is, like you were saying, Zoe, kind of on the opposite end of that spectrum, when there are other elements involved in my life, and let's say that some space opens up or time opens up, and then I realize, oh, I'm still making that excuse, but whatever that thing was that I thought was standing in the way really isn't. And like you were saying earlier, Jen, what is that second layer, and digging in and going into that second layer and figuring it out. And what's really been interesting for me to observe is that oftentimes if I would think about doing something, I used to put it into, say, a certain time of day or for a certain amount of time. And what I've come to realize over about the past 7 years is that it's not about necessarily the when, it's about just making it happen. And so my mindset has shifted to looking at waking hours and doing something within the span of waking hours, because that way, if something tends to come up that might have been an excuse in the past, I realize, well, that's just right now in the moment. It doesn't mean it's stopping me from the rest of this day.
That's right. That's a great point, Shanna. And, I think right now, everybody is faced with that. Whoa, everything that was my schedule has gone out the door. Everything that was my way of being, my way of doing business, my way of interacting professionally and personally has pretty much gone out the window. And we're all finding new ways to do things. And in a certain aspect, it almost feels like that creativity of having to make these adjustments is making us just figure out a new way. And so how particularly have you guys noticed right now, with all of these changes that are going on, how has that affected your excuses for yourself, or how you see it affecting others around you, and how they make excuses or don't make excuses or find different ones? What is the difference now versus how it's been in the past?
I don't know about the rest of you, but Shanna, you mentioned the when, and for me, full disclosure, I'm still on furlough from Walt Disney World, and so for me, the when right now is absolutely no excuse. I have all of the time in the world to do things, so that cannot be even part of the discussion of an excuse for me right now. I could try to make other excuses. It's too hot, or I'm too lazy, whatever it might be. But those are things that I can get around. So the when for me should be right now. And in our family, we're trying to do that. We're doing little projects around the house that we never have. I'm doing some fun musical projects that I had said, well, I don't really have time for that, and it's not necessary. Now it is. Now I can do those things and use it as a creative outlet for me right now that are just for me personally. They're not even things I release. They're just the things I share with my immediate family. But it helps me deal with what's going on right now. And again, there's no time frame. I can do it, literally any time I want to right now. So I think that's been the biggest difference for me. And a lot of the folks around me here is, as long as it's something you can do safely right now, and with proper physical distancing or masks or whatever the requirement is, there's no time constraint right now. You have the time to do it right now.
Yeah, one contribution I'll make to that is, so I teach guitar lessons online, and I've actually had a really big increase in my students because a lot of students were out of school towards the end of the spring and then into the summer, and a lot of parents are like, we have too much time on our hands. We have to run around, so much is happening, we need a little bit of focus. And so that's actually been beneficial, just to have that time and space to do something, like you said, Jim, that you maybe wouldn't be doing otherwise. Now it's kind of necessity almost for well-being and sense of sanity. I've noticed that with people in my life and myself, self-care is no longer just a thing that's like, well, maybe I'll get to that. It kind of seems like it's necessary to have some kind of methods to help with feeling well, uplifting, hopeful. So maybe things that we weren't doing before that would have brought us joy, now or well-being, we kind of have to, just to stay sane and okay. So that would be the one big difference that I see. And I really like to offer with my guitar students, experiment with when a practice time works. If you try to do it right after, like when they were in school or had a school day up until 3 o'clock or something, try it right after school. If you find that you really hate it and it's not working for you, don't practice at that time. Try it before dinner or try in the morning early. So experiment and give yourself permission to try something. It doesn't work. Try another time slot. Maybe it changes every single day and you just kind of go with what works for you. But I think that that's a really big thing, is seeing what works and what doesn't work. And if it doesn't, throw it out. No one's there going, you have to do it this way. So those are the few things that I've noticed.
that whole concept of self-care and also creativity, I feel like are so intertwined in this time. And the one excuse that I had for a long time, my violin was in desperate need of repair, and I kept putting it off, and finally I had it repaired, and then I got it back during this spring period, and because of the shift and everything, I wasn't spending the hours commuting that I typically do. And so I had this urge to just get it out and start playing it. And it was just so enriching for me and so fulfilling. And also what I noticed was that it just became timeless. I just would get lost in the process, and I was just making up my own music too. I wasn't playing something, or I was playing along with things and making up other parts to it. So just I think sometimes when we release whatever that excuse was, and we allow ourselves to go into it, a lot of it is sometimes I feel like for me that that resistance to making that time to do something that's nourishing for me and supportive for me as a mom, and all of the other roles that I play. So yeah, I really appreciate that correlation between the self-care and the creativity piece of it.
Absolutely. Also, really great point on that particularity around how to do something and trying to do it once and it didn't work that way. So, well, then I'm not going to do it anymore. And you made a great point of, well, if this doesn't work, try something else. It seems like, there's just a very easy wall that comes back up the minute we think the first way we're going to try something doesn't work. And it's not even about persistence. It's about, well, that's how we thought it would work. And then we have to go back and regroup and come back and hit that wall again. And sometimes it's really about just knowing you're going to be hitting this wall multiple times. Just know that from the start and have at it, just start taking some leaps against that wall. And then when you find the thing that fits, then it will just flow very easily. So you guys are awesome. These are wonderful points. Thank you so much for sharing in this way. I think it's a really good time to bring up this magical tool that we wanted to talk about today called the excuse fast. So I'd love to tap into the wisdom of Shenna Driscoll Salvato, who about 8 years ago now created this tool called the excuse fast. And it has helped hundreds of people over the last 8 years to drop the excuse that is in the way of them doing more of what they love, living a life that they love more, getting more accomplished, having more peace and sense of satisfaction in their lives. So, Shenna, could you tell us how you came up with this excuse fast and how it works and everything we need to know about it?
Sure. So I had been exposed to the idea of fasting from excuses as the focus on the excuse itself. And during that same time, I was challenged by someone I was working with to consider what my movement is. What kind of movement am I trying to create, or do I think I want to create? And when I think about encouraging and supporting people to live their passions and what they're passionate about, I thought, well, fasting from excuses is a really important part of that puzzle. And so rather than having the focus on the excuse itself, the focus is on what is something that we love to do, that we're passionate about, that for whatever reason we just don't do as much or as often as we like. And so I decided to make it just a free monthly ongoing event for people to join. And my role really has been just to hold space, to make that event happen, and to allow people to in their own worlds to commit to that. And if folks want to have some type of accountability, they can engage with other people or tell other folks about it. But the real focus is, how can I choose something that I love, I'm passionate about, I don't do as often or as much as I'd like, and for the next 21 days I am going to do this thing every single day, and I'm going to fast from any excuses I have with regard to that thing. So Yes, so most recently, it's been starting on the new moon each month and running for 21 days, and then taking a break and then starting up again the next month. And so that's the essence of the event itself. And it's something that, again, people can be public about, be private about. What I've really found for myself, it's just heightened my awareness so much, kind of digging back into what are those things that I really do love to do that I don't bring into my life. And some of the things, and since I've been doing this since January of 2013, what I've noticed is some things have really established themselves as part of my daily routine, and I haven't, it hasn't gone away. And so to me, that's really telling. And the other thing is that there are some things that I'll do for this wave of 3 weeks, and then I'll realize, I'll shift into something else, and I realize, oh, I need to go back to that same thing. Maybe I've gotten off and I'm not doing that as much anymore. So a lot of times I'll go back and revisit the same thing as well. Other times I'll have multiple things, or it'll be very general. So I encourage folks to really make it whatever works best for them and the space that they're in at that moment in time.
And so everybody here has participated in the Excuse Fast, and let's kind of open it up. I'd love to hear from everyone sort of what compelled you to participate in the Excuse Fast the first time that you did it. What caught your attention about it?
So I was reflecting briefly on this when I knew I was going to be involved in this conversation. And the thing that I came to was that I was intrigued by the idea that the things that I fear doing are actually the things that I'm also excited about. So like whatever it was that, so specifically for me as a musician, practicing or developing, working on songs, songwriting, I kind of had a resistance to that because I love doing it. It brings joy. So it was almost like there was like a blockage. So I was very intrigued by that idea of, why am I fearing this thing that I actually want to be doing, that I love, that I want as part of my life? So I was like, okay, let's try this. Let's be brave. Let's dive into that thing that scares me, but it also excites me, and just kind of be open enough to see what comes of that. That was where I was compelled to join.
For me, it was easy because I guess I had already sort of been doing that. But as soon as I saw Shenna's invitation and calling it an Excuse Fast, like, yes, it just kind of clicked. And so what it's done for me is given me focus on thinking about, am I making an excuse here, or can I be a little bit clearer in my decision making in life? And like I said before, be quick to think about something, but not as quick to make that excuse about, well, why shouldn't I do this? What's really in the way that I can't deal with, and that I can't, maybe not right this moment, but can I do this thing eventually? And so it did give me a better focus on thinking about those, any life decisions that were coming down the road.
Right. For me, even, I hate to use the word discipline around it, because there is that element to it, but I felt like for me, it provided that discipline of taking away that one element and doing something over and over. And I like that it's only 21 days. I like that I know I can commit to it, but it's not even a whole month. And it's enough of a cycle that it helps me become more aware of my habits. I'm not a big habit person anyway. I'm more of a ritual person. And so to have this sort of set aside to be intentional about something each day that I want to be doing and that I want to be experiencing, and incorporating all those elements that you guys have brought up about, well, it doesn't matter when. If I want to be doing Qigong every day, it could be 5 minutes before I get into bed. It could be a full hour in the middle of the day. It could be any element of that, but it's about the intention and the presence that I bring to whatever it is that I want to be doing. And so really just having the excuse to have no excuse is what I really loved about it. So
One thing that I've noticed in myself, and I'm curious if any of you have noticed this, is that I recognize that in my language and in the way I use words, that if I didn't do something, I would follow it with a because. Oh, apologizing for something, for example. Oh, I'm sorry I'm late. You know, this happened, or I was late because. And I realized that I just started dropping the because, or being more mindful of that, that it doesn't matter. I didn't do it. I don't have to follow with some excuse for why something I said I was going to do, or something that didn't follow through the way I had planned actually did. So I'm just curious if any of you noticed, if you've reframed or changed, or had any different awareness of how you speak about things like that, or things that you say you're going to do that you don't do, or anything in that realm.
Sure, I'd love to share, because this is one of the things that I've actually been excited to share, that I've talked about with other people. Before the excuse fast, I had this phrase, and I apologize, I don't know where I got it from, if it's something I made up or something I read somewhere years ago, but there is a difference between excuses and reasons. And reasons are things that can either be improved, controlled, or dealt with. What I mean by that is it could be a reason that you can improve, like your physical health or your job skills or education. That's something that you can do something about today if necessary. There are other things that can be controlled, things like taking care of your car, sticking to your calendar reminders. So you have to keep a calendar, but you also have to pay attention when the reminder comes up. You can't just swipe it and say, I'll deal with that later. You have to follow that. You put it on your calendar for a reason, so you need to pay attention to that. And then the third one I said is that reasons can be dealt with, and that's things like weather and traffic. Those are things that are out of our control, but we have enough technology and information these days that we can do something about it. Here around Walt Disney World, I hear all the time especially from newer people to the area, wow, traffic was crazy. Well, guess what? It's Walt Disney World. It's Universal. It's SeaWorld. We live in one of the biggest tourism capitals in the world. Deal with the traffic. Leave earlier or change your schedule in some way. That cannot continue to be an excuse. You could say it was traffic once or twice, but once you've learned that traffic is a real thing down here, then it's on you. Then it's your fault. It's not an excuse. So you just deal with that. Leave a few minutes earlier, take a different route, whatever the case might be. And I think that's sometimes what people use as an excuse, but really it's a reason that can be dealt with in a certain way. Now I'm talking about everything I've just said there is primarily a concrete issue, very defined things. If we start getting into abstract issues like your emotional health, morals, religion, even artistic things that we're talking about, that's a much deeper conversation that oftentimes is something only should be talked about with maybe your close family, or even a therapist of some kind. That there's not a defined way to deal with it. There's a defined way to deal with your schedule and traffic and your physical health. But when it comes to some of those deeper emotional issues, everybody's going to be different there. And I'm not going to tell you how to deal with your emotional health because that's something that you have to do personally. I can tell you how to deal with traffic, but I can't tell you how to deal with your emotional health. That's something you have to do personally.
One thing I'm sort of noticing with my clients, specifically as a transformational coach, working with people in all different aspects of life, but a lot of time comes down to emotional health. And what's really funny that I'm noticing now is that people are coming to me, and part of our work together is to bring up those emotional issues and then move them through, figure out how to tackle them, how to replace them with something else, and move through in a way that's really beneficial into the other side of turning it into something productive for them. But what I'm noticing now is that people will come and say, Jennifer, I am realizing that I have an endless supply of these excuses. I just keep coming up with new ones, and like, we can keep tackling them, we can keep tearing them down. But what I'm realizing is that it's only my own resistance to what I really want. And when the amount, the measure of how much I want what I want is more than my resistance to it, then I don't have any excuses anymore. And I just keep my focus and attention on what it is that I want and how, like you brought up even earlier, Jim, how I can have that versus how can I keep myself from it. So there's a very interesting shift right now I'm noticing where people are becoming so much more self-aware around excuses.
Mm. What about the different reasons? And this is another thing that I find really fascinating. So the very typical excuses such as there's not enough time, there's not enough money, there's not enough space. Has anyone seen a pattern, or is anyone interested in sharing some of those very specific excuses that you've noticed surfacing if you do meet that resistance?
Yeah, I think a big thing for me initially, which has definitely decreased, is this what will people say or think? So if I'm following my passion, if I'm putting myself out there with music, or if I'm living with other people and I'm, playing music and they can hear me singing or something, what will people think? Like maybe I don't sound the best today, or maybe I don't totally feel like doing it. So how do I get myself to do it if I have that hang up of how will others see me, or the judgments that might come in. So I think that that's a constant thing to be working out, but just knowing that it's there is definitely been a really big life helper for me of like seeing it within this context of why I'm making excuses for particular things, recognizing that I do that in life for various reasons. And when that voice comes in of comparison to others, or what will people say or think, just recognizing it's there and kind of, I guess, being easy on myself, like having that gentleness a little bit of just being like, okay, that's something that I'm working through. And it might not leave right away. That might always be there to some extent, but kind of still going for that thing anyway, still making it happen.
Yeah.
Zoe, that's performer 101 right there. Is, I've told younger performers, I've messed up. I've made mistakes in performances more times than I can count, and it just is going to happen. Whether it's just like you said, maybe just at home, goofing around with something, but also in real performances, and it's just something you have to get over. That moment, that whatever you messed up, that note that you missed, that moment is gone. So the more that you stress about that and think about, oh, I messed up that note in measure 24, the more you do that, the more that's going to just, rattle around in your brain forever. You need to forget that moment and move on. And the best way to deal with that is exactly what you just said, is to go into it with the right mindset. If you make a mistake, okay. I've also told people, if I wanted to just hear music that was perfect all the time, I would just put on recordings. Instead, I like to go to live concerts. I like to, hear my friends sing, or see a play or a musical somewhere. I could just as easily put on the cast recording of, Hamilton. I'd rather go see it in person, which I haven't, by the way. But that's the whole thing about performances, is that that thing that we all love, you want to do it in front of someone, but that perception of, oh, I'm going to make a mistake, or I hope it goes well. And that's part of that tension that we love as performers. But the more you do it, the more comfortable and relaxed that you get it. And you can really apply that to real life. We've all made mistakes out in public. The better you can deal with those mistakes and not have them be just, nailed into your brain of, oh, I can't believe I did that. The more you can deal with that, the better your emotional health is going to be. That's easier said than done, but that's the attitude of just what you said, the attitude that we need to go into things like that.
The one thing that just came to me is both of you were speaking, and Jim, you were referring earlier to bringing your family into some of these projects you're doing too, and having these conversations, and Zoe thinking about you being in front of an audience. Jen, the work that you do with people, that there's this entire ripple effect that when we as individuals make this commitment and we act and we make it happen, that Zoe, who knows the people that you're inspiring out in the audience that didn't even notice the missed note or whatever that you had noticed, and also the ripple even within family units and within work communities. I think that there's just a lot of power in that, and us having that focus and that intent, and not even really having to speak about it too much, but just through that action of what we're doing. And then how does that have this ripple of other people perhaps snapping into action in different ways when they might have been putting it off as well. So thanks for that.
And to your point, Shanna, you had mentioned sort of those big blanket excuses, if you will, that come up. You know, I don't have the time, I don't have the money, I don't have the whatever. And the interesting thing is that there's a whole series of excuses that can be boiled down into very few things. For example, those all really boil down to lack. And it's a lack of time, or a lack of money, or a lack of energy, or a lack of space, any of those things. And so when we start realizing that, yeah, we're really just making the same excuse over and over with different packaging, then it kind of dawns on us like, yeah, well, okay, maybe I could let that go. And I think that's what the Excuse Fast does really well, is it lets us untangle those along the way, where you become more aware of how you're packaging those excuses for yourself, and they really boil down to one thing. And over that sequence of time, you have the ability to let that go. So it's not only, it's about the awareness of realizing how you're using it, and how, like, the lengths you're willing to go to keep using it. And yet over that span of time, you have the ability to move through that series and let it go, which I think is incredibly powerful.
Yeah. One other thing that I'm curious about is when you all have caught yourself. So you have this one thing that you're deciding to commit to during the course of these 21 days, and you get ready to do that thing, and then you kind of catch yourself. Is there anything that you've noticed about yourself or your way of being, or perhaps even the cycle of the day? And Zoe, you were alluding to this with the practicing after 3 o'clock idea. Is there anything that comes up for any of you with that, with regard to that moment of kind of catching yourself and noticing what you're doing if you're going to or about to make an excuse?
Earlier I said, why not? And that perception, that concept has led me to experience new things, not just recently, but for my entire adult life, pretty much, saying why not, and experience new things, which then often leads to additional new experiences that you would have never thought of before. Meeting people that if you just kept to your normal little box, you would never meet. And so that ripple effect that we've mentioned, that applies to that as well. Those new experiences, new people, and then learning new skills. I mean, there's skills I've learned in my professional life that if you'd have said years ago, you're going to be doing this, this, and this, I was, you're crazy. I would never think about doing that. But, we grow as people, we grow as, professionals in our work, and as adults or parents or whatever it might be. So, I have stopped also saying, I'll never do that, or I'll always do it this way. I'll never do it this way. I'll always do it this way. Always and never are very powerful words. And I think in our lives, they're almost never applicable. There's very few always, and there's very few nevers. We're usually somewhere in the middle. So if that's the other way I apply my adult thinking to, is I might think in the moment, I'll never do something like that. But then look at what I'm living in Florida right now. I would have never thought that I would have been doing that when I was in middle school and high school. I was born in Florida, by the way. I don't know if you folks know that, but my parents moved to Pennsylvania before I started kindergarten. So I never really felt like I was from Florida. but I would have never thought that. I liked winter. I liked cold weather. And then as I got older, that cold weather started to dig at me a little bit more. And that was one of the things that I used as an excuse for not moving to Florida was, oh, it's too hot. It's too hot. Well, eventually my body changed and I didn't like the cold weather anymore. And I like the hotter weather. And so that's one of those nevers that I'll never move to Florida. Here I am. So that why not has been part of my life for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think to a certain extent too, it's sort of about, a lot of times it can be about on or off. And sometimes it's more about priming the flow of creativity or whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. So, like as a painter, I have noticed that how I create in art affects how I create in other areas of life. And so sometimes if there's something I'm really wanting to accomplish, but I can't, I'm just not lining up with the task itself, then I draw on something else to help me sort of prime that pump or prime that flow. So if I really need to be writing, but I can't spit the words out, I start moving a paintbrush. And then through the process of using that other medium, then the flow is open and it's very easy for me to sit down and spit out whatever it is that I need to write. But I used to think of it very much as a on or off switch. And now it's let's turn up the dial of my flow and creativity, but that might mean doing it in a way other than what my outcome is going to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another thing that comes to mind too is that idea of start and finish and completion, and that doing the things we love, it doesn't mean we have to do it to the point of completion. And that's so true in any creative endeavor. And I find that I sometimes get stuck in that with different projects. Well, I'm not going to start it because I know I'm not going to finish it right now. Well, I'm never going to finish it if I don't start it. And so that idea of the why not, and then also looking at what you were saying about that idea of lack, or Zoe, you were talking about fear, just bringing in that combination of why not look at all this abundance? Why not look at all this abundance? And really focusing on not the lack of things and the excuses we're making, but having that sensation, and then finding just 3 things where we notice there's an abundance of something that can allow us to get into the flow and prime the pump and turn up the dial a little bit.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. Just in the sense of having that fear of finishing something. And so I actually found all of my notes that I've written from my excuse fasts since 2018-ish. So I have my jar of all of my written down excuse fast, but also what I found in there were a few, so I'm big into writing and doing, just like 10 minutes in the morning, just writing prompts. I'm also a songwriter. So I saw in there something that I wrote about grieving when finishing something, like kind of feeling uncomfortable that like I would be resistant to getting to that point where a song was done or a project was done or a Netflix series even is done or a book. Like I had this same relationship with that completion, that finalization was like, I'm going to miss something. Something's going to be gone that I'm no longer attached to. It's like once I'm finished, then it's out there in the world. So I found that interesting that was something I actually had to kind of tease out a little bit, was like, why is that a little uncomfortable to complete? And can I just enjoy the process of it? Can I enjoy the phase of the idea, the imagination and the inspiration kind of, development and working something out? What is that next phase? Maybe I have to do some editing, and then the sharing. Maybe the sharing is also exciting. So seeing all of those parts of a creative journey as having their own life and energy rather than it just being beginning end and then on to the next thing.
And that ties into what Jim was saying too about then what comes next, that you meet this new person, you're exposed to this new idea, or that window that opens. So again, looking, and I totally understand what you're saying there, Zoe. And yeah, I like that kind of trifecta of the why not, and abundance, and what's the door or the window that's opening through me committing to this and going through it. And I'm glad you shared your jar. I'm going to grab mine here. This is not a requirement, but just something if people want a physical act to do. I just have an old antique canning jar here, and I'll write cards, and then I'll post them just kind of at the top of the jar where I can look at it, somewhere where it helps to remind me, and then I can, you know, put it in, and then you have these collections. And that's really interesting hearing you going back and looking in. And, you know, sometimes it's just a mental thing for me, but having the physical reminder there can be helpful too. And it's not something that's digital, something that we can have that's concrete. So.
Beautiful. This is such an amazing exchange. And I think that's a beautiful way to sort of wrap this, Shanna, into a culmination of, you know, what we're experiencing, processing, the turning it into abundance, and then opening to what's next. So I'd like to wrap up with a question about what are each of you opening to next, and what might the excuse be that you're taking out of the way in this next excuse fast as you move toward it?
I'll start. For me, one of the things I've started last year, but I guess early 2019, was finally starting grad school after graduating with my undergrad 20, whatever it was, years ago, and how the world has changed and how education has changed. When I was an undergrad, I took one non-classroom class, and we still did it out of a book, and you typed up papers and emailed them to the instructor. And that was the closest I ever got to online learning 20 years ago. And actually, thanks to Disney and some of the programs that they have, they're paying for this. So that was one big excuse that many of us have is, you know, especially with grad school, if you're going to do it part-time and with a slow process, one class at a time, I'm not eligible for any kind of financial assistance somewhere. So it was all going to be out of pocket. And that was one big excuse I used for years when I said, oh, maybe I should do this. It's going to cost me, you know, $5,000 a year or whatever it is. Now Disney is paying for that. And so that was a big excuse. As soon as that opened up, I remember saying to my wife, I said, I just lost my biggest excuse for not going back to grad school. So I immediately started looking into it. What will be applicable to me, and how will that work? And then the second question was, how does online learning work? Depending on the subject matter that you're doing. And so one big thing that did for me was it, again, opened me up to new experiences. I didn't think I would actually be doing online learning, true online learning at this point in my life. So that the release of that financial excuse opened me up to a lot of different things, and that's been great for me. I've been taking one or two classes now, well, one at a time, but I've taken 4 or 5 classes now. And what's been great is not only learning, but I'm learning about other people, their experiences, their perceptions. One of the first class I took, I'll give you the quick example. I'm studying master's in communication management. And so the first class I took, I wanted it to be something I could understand and maybe have some experience in. So that was effective facilitation. I've been a speaker and a performer and a trainer for a long time. So effective facilitation was something that I think I could understand. And I did fine. But what I learned more from what other people were struggling with, what their challenges or their excuses were. Some of the people had said, I've never spoken in public. I've never given any kind of presentation to a classroom or to an audience of any kind. And so I wanted to learn what their challenges were, and then how I could help other people I work with get over those things or learn new resources. And so again, if you'd have asked me that, let's say 5 years ago, I'd have said, well, no, I don't quite have enough time, and I definitely don't have enough money to do those things. And then once those obstacles were out of my way, I had no excuse. And I've learned so much since then, and a lot of new things, and just learning how education works these days and what the advantages and benefits and the disadvantages are of it as well. I do miss being in a classroom with people, but this online learning has been a wonderful experience for me, and I have more of that to look forward to. So that's been one of the biggest changes for me recently, and then we'll continue moving forward as I continue my studies.
Beautiful.
I have two things. So I recorded a CD for my bachelor's degree. I did an independent bachelor's degree. And so I finished writing a song during the pandemic. It's called When It's Over. And it's kind of this hopeful, when it's over, we'll be stronger, we'll be wiser, we'll be living with more care. And so I have that song as well as 3 other songs, and my last CD was 4 original songs. So now I have 4 songs again, and I feel like I really want to share them with the world, and I want to record them in some way, but I'm so intimidated by actually recording another CD. It's so much time, it's energy, it's thought, it's money, it's all of that. So I feel like I need to tease out, like, allowing myself to be in the process, like I was talking about, rather than it being like this big thing I need to do. Like, nobody's telling me I need to do this. It's for myself. So if I can enjoy the recording, like the pieces that go into it, I think that that's where I'm going to be able to actually take steps, rather than it being this daunting task that, you know, people are going to look down on me if I don't finish or something. Just really let it be a creative process. So that's kind of where I'm at with, you know, trying to not use excuses for that. And I have one other thing. So I have my own business now called Guitar and Songwriting Coaching with Zoe. So I do guitar lessons and then songwriting coaching and some singing as well. And I've run an online course a few times now, and I'd really like to move it so it's more video, so people can work at their own pace. So it kind of takes me out of the equation where I'm not putting as much time in one-to-one lessons. I'll still do that partially, but so I have this intimidation around video, and so I have thought about it with this idea of, you know, what would be my next excuse fast around. And I think video, if I'm just actually teaching, like if I'm actually talking to someone and then I just record it, I would be so much more comfortable, rather than feeling like I need to set up a camera and like have my guitar and have this whole script. Like, what if it's just more relaxed and just flow and how I would normally be doing it? So I think that's my next step for making the video thing more organic, and then people can work at their own pace for learning guitar. So those are my couple of things that I will be working on.
Beautiful. Shen, how about you?
So for me, it's 2 things. So I've had a lot of time open up this summer that I haven't had for the past 8 years. A program that I've taught in for the past 8 years was canceled because of the no face-to-face courses this summer. So I have been digging back into some projects that I've had on the back burner and realizing that time is not an excuse anymore. So I'm really unearthing those and putting some intentional time into those. And once I get in, it definitely is flowing. So that's been very freeing, and I'm excited about that. And then on another perspective, I find that, again, as a spouse and as a mother, that sometimes I think, oh, I'm not going to do X because I have to do this household chore or something. So for example, I'm not a big movie watcher at all, because I'm usually doing a lot of other projects, and things like my daughter really wanted to watch a movie, and so the other night I said, yes, let's watch a movie together, or going on an extra long hike with my husband because I could have stayed home and done some house project, but I said no, I need to do that. So I think it's interesting too how the excuses that we make and the things that we focus on can also not be just self-serving for ourselves, but how can we look at our immediate community, and how can we drop the excuses from sharing some more valuable time with them as well.
Exactly. Mine is very similar as well. You know, I've had all these back burner projects that I've wanted to do, one of which being this series. And now is the time. There's so much opportunity to connect with people like you guys who have unique and beautiful perspectives and are so willing to share. And so I'm opening up to that. And I'm so glad that we've had the opportunity to be together today. Thank you all so much for sharing and opening up and giving us the perspective of how you've made this excuse fast work for you, how it's changed things in your life, and how you intend to use it moving forward. If anyone listening would also like to participate, please go to elanvite.com/excusefast and join us for the next excuse fast to drop whatever's in the way of more of what you want to have and be living in your life.
Come on in, we'll have a blast. Join us in the excuse fast. That's it.